Hi, Amy Elizabeth, somatic and intuitive healer here.
Oh, and I'm Kate. I like to bring a little clarity to what we're chatting about.
So, the thing I wanted to touch in about today is, remember the dark moon we had on the 12th? We talked a little bit about the fact that Neptune was square that moon and that Neptune had recently stationed direct.
Okay.
And so it was the 6th when Neptune stationed direct.
Right. And we've talked about stationing direct. What that
Yes.
means. Okay.
The retrograde
We talked
cycle.
about all the retrograde, yep.
And that it appears the planets are moving backwards. It has to do with where they are in the path of their ecliptic. And when it stations direct, what happens is it looks like, and this is station retrograde, whenever it stations, that means it's energetically turning directions.
Okay.
So right now, Neptune is at 24 degrees of Pisces.
Okay.
Neptune is a generational signature. And I wanted to touch into this today because Neptune in its highest, most beautiful, amazing energy is the shaman. It is this beautiful androgynous energy. It is the divine union of masculine and feminine, creating an actual whole being that is neither one or the other,
Okay.
but both. And it is able to move from such a high place that it no longer recognizes chaos.
Okay.
Now, these are big, huge concepts to no longer recognize chaos.
Okay.
Because for those of us that are super into nature, we understand that everything moves and grows in what's called the Fibonacci sequence. Everybody know what the Fibonacci sequence is? Google it.
We won't get into it today.
It's a type
cool.
of spiral.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a type of spiral that grows bigger as it goes. Which for those of you that have been working with me or studying with me for a long time, you will often hear me talk about the spiral that goes deeper and higher and broader. It gets wider. So it moves in 360 degrees. That's a Fibonacci spiral. And Neptune in its shadow, Neptune in its messiness is fog.
Okay.
And it gets really overwhelmed because it doesn't know where it's going and it doesn't know where it wants to do. And it clings to its illusions or its delusions.
Okay.
Which was very, very easy in the Sagittarius dark moon. Because as we spoke about, we're no good at seeing in the dark. We're just not, which brought us to the shifting from the idea of understanding to feeling the truth of things in us. Okay. And on Saturday, the early evening Central Time, the Sun and Neptune moved into an exact square.
Okay.
So they were in an orb conjunction. I'm sorry, they were in an orb square, which means the Sun and the Moon were conjunct and they were at a 90-degree angle.
Okay.
To Neptune. Right. And then the moon moved on. The moon moves signs every 2.5 days. So it hangs out and is new for a while. And then it's like, peace out. I love you. Gotta go. Think about what we talked about. And I'll see you in 28 days. And it moved on and it squared off with Neptune. So while we were still in the dark, the moon and Neptune squared up. Our emotional self came into a conflictual, well, I don't know. So because I don't know, I can't decide. Okay. Because I can't see things clearly. Moment with Neptune.
Little analysis paralysis kind of a,
yeah.
I can't see.
I can't see, or we tend to fumble around, or we have an awareness emotionally, that feeling the truth. We feel that we're not being completely honest with ourselves, or we feel like, oh, I see where I'm deluding myself. Mm-hmm. I see where I'm clinging to a delusion around how things were, are, could be. Fill in your thing. Then on the 13th, no, I'm sorry, not the 13th. That would have been that would have been the 16th, right? Yes, the 16th, the sun moved into a square with Neptune. And why that feels powerful right now is that the sun is our consciousness.
And it can see through, I would think, the fog now, right?
Well, it can burn off the fog.
Okay.
And this can be the conflict we feel internally when we actually see our own delusions. Shit. So Saturday and in the days between the dark moon and for the next few days, we're in a position where we may be seen where we delude ourselves. And that's the shadow of Neptune. Because of course, the light is this really high, I can see the patterns and I can see clearly. The shadow is I want to cling to my delusional behavior, my delusional thoughts, my delusional emotions. And for people born early 1981 till end, so early 1981 and late 1982, because of Mercury's retrograde cycle, these folks have a Neptune that's going to be around 23, 24, or 25 degrees of Sagittarius.
So it's hitting them more.
Okay. Because they're in what's called their Neptune square, which is a once in a lifetime astrological event that happens to all of us who are lucky enough to make it to our midlife crises. Whoop, whoop.
I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not there yet.
You're not there
I'm
yet.
just a baby.
So what we culturally call the midlife crisis is actually kind of our celebration of adulthood from a shamanic standpoint. And it's a series of transits astrologically that are meant to help us grow and expand as we move towards our next level of mastery. So in astrology, we don't view anybody having reached adulthood until they reach age 30. Because that is the age at which you have had an embodied experience, whether you're aware of it or not, of each of your archetypes. And archetypes, because I'm going to repeat it, are just threads of energy that make up our behavioral, our thought patterns, our emotional patterns, and we get to be in charge of them or not. Cool. You're really verbose today.
You're bringing the show. I got nothing to say.
I am actually speaking in English today.
Yeah, I think we're doing okay. So I guess I'm curious now. So what's the next thing?
What's the next piece of what's happening?
So we had the fog. Now the sun is here to bring some clarity.
The sun is here.
And then what?
Well, today our friend Mercury, who is retrograde and in Capricorn still, had a trine with Jupiter.
Oh, that sounds fun.
Who is also retrograde and in an earth sign.
Okay.
So remember, Mercury is the trickster. He's the communicator. He's in charge of transportation. And we've got Jupiter, who just wants to make things bigger.
Yes.
And they're both retrograde.
Okay.
So for people who have either of those signs retrograde, this is super comfortable. Especially the Mercury in retrograde people. These are their favorite times of year. Even if everything else around them is just
crashing and falling and
not functioning, the people who have a natal or native Mercury retrograde in their charts are going to be more comfortable. Okay. But a trine is a supportive aspect. So the two of them coming into trine in an earth sign, it can be related to really practical boots on the ground ways in which so Taurus is a lot about our self-esteem, and Capricorn is the CEO of the zodiac. It is kind of the oldest sign. It can be your old curmudgeon.
Okay.
It can be the curmudgeon,
Okay.
which this time of year is always interesting when
Mhm.
we run into curmudgeons. And the curmudgeon in and of itself is an archetype.
Okay.
So they met up today because Mercury's on his way back to Sagittarius, which will happen to kick off our round of Mercury retrogrades for next year.
Okay.
Because this is a long Mercury retrograde. This is like a 4-week Mercury retrograde compared to our usual 3 weeks.
Hang on.
There's also a sign change.
Okay.
So we start retrograde in practicality, boots on the ground.
Mhm.
We move the retrograde
Sagittarius.
into the expansive, boundless optimism and transformational power that is Sagittarius, philosophy, religion, law. And then it's going to move back into Capricorn.
Okay.
When it's direct again. So those are kind of the things I wanted to touch on, but really this Neptune piece. So for those of you that are in your Neptune square, this is a normal part of what we culturally call the midlife crisis, and it is about growing the fuck up.
With warmth. She means that with warmth.
I do.
Yeah.
I do mean that with warmth. All kinds of love. It happens in conjunction, so with or before the Pluto square. The Pluto square happening with the Neptune square is kind of a fun thing because the Neptune square is meant to invite us to step out of our delusions. So we have a lot of cultural stories about how a midlife crisis looks.
Mhm.
Sports cars, younger partners, divorces, a lot of, I'm going to try to capture my youth
Mhm.
rather than moving forward. So those are all examples of a midlife crisis not being worked. A Neptune square and a Pluto square not being worked.
Or worked in not maybe the best way.
Well,
They're working it, but they're not doing a great job.
Or it's working you.
Yeah.
It's working you rather than you meeting it with any consciousness. So there's the Pluto square, there's the Neptune square. The Jupiter return isn't a huge deal. It happens every 11 to 12 years. But you also have your Saturn opposition, your Uranus opposition, which is the single hardest transit of the human lifetime. You only get one of those. Do it well. You have your Chiron return, you have a nodal reversal. Those happen every 18 years. So it can start as early as 38 for some people.
Okay.
But what it is it's a decade-long medicine walk to really step into ownership of your life.
Okay. And I think we've talked about
Medicine walks.
yes,
Mhm.
defining that. Okay.
Medicine walk is a conscious journey of moving toward what is your fate rather than your destiny,
Okay.
and to a conscious stepping towards of your destiny rather than your fate, and understanding that to get to your destiny you need to walk through your fate.
Okay.
You need to be in it and be like, okay, I see all this and I'm going to keep going. So Neptune and Sagittarius, for those of you that are like, oh my goodness, am I in my Neptune square? Neptune is a generational signature. It was in Sagittarius from 1970 until 1984.
Oh, that's a long time.
So there is a lot of us that have Neptune and Sagittarius. We are optimistic. We love us some philosophy. We are intrigued by religious values and have zero time, zero energy for the dogma and the BS that is Orthodox religious systems. We are really intrigued by the big questions in life.
Okay.
So that's kind of just a little piece. And then, of course, how Neptune and Sagittarius plays out depends on what house it's in for you as an individual, which has to do with your birth time and your birth location, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And keeping in mind that a big piece of Neptune is the recognition that we are infinite beings having a very finite experience.
Mm-hmm.
And we have the capacity to shift out of our delusion at any time when we move past our finite ego.
Okay.
when we move into, there's so much there that we can lean into. So
That works for me. That's a lot.
questions,
A lot of new stuff.
comments, dedications, requests. I just figured we need to throw a little more shamanism and archetypes in here, in addition to the astrology. So I do astrological readings. I work with people shamanically. I've got a live workshop happening on January 13th for women here in Minneapolis. There are still some spots remaining. So reach out.
Nice.
And Kate will be here to
I'll be
translate.
here. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, good.